The following interview is being conducted as part of the Price of Freedom project by the Madison County Military Heritage Commission to inform our community of the sacrifices made by those in the military on battlefields around the world. I wish to thank the Huntsville School System and the ETV Broadcast Center for their help in presenting this Military Heritage Program. Hello everyone, I'm Tom Kennemer. Welcome to our program. Today we'll be talking with U.S. Army veteran Harold Stitt. Harold served 20 years in the Army with 2 tours in Vietnam, where he received 2 awards of the Distinguished Flying Cross for his bravery under fire while serving as an aircraft commander. He also received the Purple Heart for wounds he suffered while serving in country. Harold was inducted into the Madison County Military Hall of Heroes in 2016. Harold, it's a pleasure to have you with us today, sir.
It's a pleasure
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
Tell us a little about yourself. You're originally from PA, Pennsylvania,
Central
right?
Pennsylvania, a little town called Altoona, built around the Pennsylvania Railroad Company in its original days. And about 40 miles from the main campus at Penn State, which we follow still today.
Happy Valley?
Yeah, Happy Valley. Yeah, normally this Happy Valley's coming back.
Yeah,
and so forth.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little about your family. You have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I do. I have both younger. My younger brother still lives there, and most of his family live there. I have aunts and so forth, not any more uncles that I remember. They're still alive, but so I get back there recently. As much
as often as you can.
As often as you can, yeah. And I had tried to get back there to see my mother, who was in a nursing home, because I had problems with my wife here, her medical problems. And we didn't get there for a couple of years, so I started trying to make up time. And last summer, she passed away, and right after I had a surgery and couldn't even go to her funeral, so that was tough. But those are good people up there. They really are.
Was your dad in the military, Harold?
Yes, he was. Before I do off, I do have a sister that lives in St. Petersburg, Florida. She's also younger, but she's been there for over 50 years too. But yeah, Dad was, and Dad had 4 other brothers that were in there with him at the same time. And
they all served in the Army?
No, there was one Navy guy. He was a baker in the Navy. The others were all Army. Kind of a mixed bag there. One was in the Battle of the Bulge, one was a prisoner of war, and so forth. So my grandparents, I don't know what they went through, knowing they had 5 sons in there, whatever. But it happened in those days, I guess. It really did. So yes.
So you grew up being around some military.
Yeah, and they always
that sort of thing.
That's true. They always had a respect for it, and those that went later. I mean, that was just a part. You absolutely almost expected to do so yourself when the time came, because it was just something that was there. It's still there in that part of the state.
Now, you're an Army aviator. Was any of your relatives involved in aviation?
No,
in their military careers?
No, not really. Yeah. I was at a time when the Vietnam situation, President Kennedy had said they weren't going to draft any married men into the Vietnam War. Well, after about 3 years, they weren't meeting their numbers, so they decided they were going to draft married men with no children. And I said, uh-oh, because my wife and I had been married about 3 years at that time, and I told her, I said, this is going to catch me. And so right at about that time, I saw a picture in the newspaper of somebody, a local guy there that had gone through the Army's flight program. And I said, you know what? I might want to do that. You're talking to a guy who never even flew on an airplane of any kind. And so the Army had the only program that I could not, or did not have to have a bachelor's degree of some kind. Didn't matter what it was. You just had to have it in order to go through their flight program. So I went to the Army, and that's, I beat the draft by 10 days when it came down to it.
What were you doing, Harold, before you went in?
Well, I was a machinist apprentice for the Pennsylvania Railroad Company.
I see.
And had been for 3.5, or more than 3.5 years. It was a 4-year program. They could have held me till I completed it, but they didn't. So when I later on decided to stay in the Army, I got a letter that said, it's obvious you no longer desire employment with this company. And I said, yeah, I don't. So.
What was your interest in aviation? You always had
it was just something that I thought I might want to do. It was different. Not everybody had done that.
Right.
I could have just let them draft me. And at the time, you could volunteer for the draft for the other services. You go to the Navy, Marines, so forth at that time. and only do 2 years and come home. But I don't know. I thought if you're going to do something, get something back, and that's the reason I went.
Tell us a little about aviation training. Where did you go, and how long was it, and so forth?
Well, it took about a year. Okay, to go to basic training, and then I went to Fort Walters, Texas, west of Fort Worth, and that was the primary helicopter school down there. It was Camp Walters at one time, but they opened it up. Farmers had a lot of land out in that part of the country, and we used that land for our training and so forth. And the second half was at Fort Rucker, Alabama, for the instrument training and transition into the UE and tactics. So, and it did take just about a year to get through all that.
I see. And, now, did you go? Did you go directly to Vietnam, or did you go to another base after after your training?
They were trying to get us there as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Really, that.
And what year was this now?
This was '67.
67. Okay.
Valentine's Day '67.
Wow.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
that happened a couple things in my life, but. I went to Fort Bragg to join up with a unit that was forming to go over as a unit, and we were only there about three and a half months. Was the eventually the 191st Assault Helicopter Company. We packed up all the equipment. We flew our helicopters to Stockton, California, so they could prepare them to be shipped over on a carrier or ship of some kind, and came back home, and we left Pope Air Force Base at Fort Bragg as a unit. Got on a plane there and left.
Gave you a couple of weeks of leave before you.
Oh yeah. But actually, we were back there. My wife waved goodbye to the plane and drove back to Pennsylvania. That was
Cross country.
Yeah, that's right. True.
Now, what kind of aircraft did you? Was this a Huey? Assault? Describe your aircraft.
Okay, the Huey served several purposes. It was a very good helicopter. And still in service a lot of places today. Right. It's been around a long time. Yeah. And the Huey was used both as a gunship at that time and as a slick, as a medevac, and then all kinds. The utility version is what I had flown, and over that tour anyway. I did later on get a transition into the Cobra, the attack helicopter. And that's what we primarily did. We flew combat assault missions most of that tour.
Before we talk about the military action you were involved with, Harold, let's talk about what it was like when you first got to Vietnam. Did you undergo further training there before going into the combat area?
Absolutely. Probably not as much as we needed. We got there ahead of our aircraft, and we were farmed out to units that were already in country to fly with them for a short period to get in-country training, get our feet wet, because believe me.
Is it different locations?
Yeah, we went to different places. We were farmed, not just the way we were scattered around.
Sure.
And then the plan was for 30 days for that to happen. Well, for some reason, I was only out there 2 weeks, and I got a call you were going back to the unit. Found out that they needed to make half of us aircraft commanders, and I was selected to be one of those. And there were, later on, there was a requirement to be in country 3 months, and they had to have 300 flight hours and be voted on by your peers. No, they didn't do that. They just picked us out and said, "You're it," And that was.
They volunteered you, right?
Oh yeah, and geez, that was a heck of a thing because we were really new. We really were. Yeah. We got people. There were people that were in country from other units that were infused into our company, and then they had to move some of us out because we would all come back to the States at the same time a year later, and they didn't need that. So they had a plan that worked pretty well. Not always, but it did. So
what outfit did you finally settle with?
I stayed with the 191st the entire year.
I see.
And in fact, when it came time a year later. My good friend today, still, was my platoon leader when we left, and he and I were the only two the pilots left in that first platoon that had gone over with the unit. A couple had been infused to other units. Some were wounded, came home early, and so forth. But he and I we were there for the entire year, and that's we a lot of reasons why we keep in touch today.
Good.
Yeah, we did.
Went through a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we figured after we was there a couple of months flying, he just decided, hey, look, we're never going to get out of this place, so let's go make the most of it. Yeah.
Harold, when you did have free time, however little that was in Vietnam, what could you do? Did they pull up a tarpaulin or something and have a movie or that sort of thing?
They did some of that. we lived in tents for 10 months, and they finally got a semi-permanent structure built, and we moved into that. And they did do that at nights a couple times a week. They had films there, but as far as free time, there wasn't a whole lot of that, really. There wasn't. And we were always short on people. We had to, everybody was committed every day, and there was normally one guy left over, and you were standby to help fly another aircraft out in case somebody went down and they needed to replace it. Now, so you weren't really free. And I did spend most of my time catching up on my letter writing and that kind of things that when you came back, you were exhausted. I did manage to send something to my wife every day so she knew that everything was okay. Whether I just said hello, goodbye, whatever it was, but she got the envelope in the mail. So.
Yeah. But you didn't, when you watched a movie, you didn't watch all war movies or anything.
No,
they gave you a little variety,
yeah,
right?
they did, but they were, but some of them were pretty old though, you know. It wasn't,
been around for a while.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And not all were in Keller either.
Harold, I know, and you touched on it a little earlier. I'm sure you formed lasting friendships in service, and you still stay in contact with some of your friends, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very seldom as the day go by when somebody's not on my email. We have an organization with the 191st today that we've had, and we have every other year reunions. I've been the president of that organization for the last 8 years and been asked recently to go for 2 more.
Right.
But that reunion, the gathering, and the last one was in Las Vegas. It was our 50th year. We had a couple hundred people there. Just an outstanding time. And it's amazing. We went through some pretty rough times together, and that bonding is irreplaceable. Once you're back together, within an hour, it's like we're back 50 years, you know, and there it is.
Brings back a lot of memories.
It does. It really does. Yes.
There was no email, and you couldn't text anybody back then. It was so good to receive a letter from home.
Oh, geez, absolutely.
Man, that was great.
And that really, you really looked forward to the email every day because there were no cell phones. There was no phone calls. There was none of that. And you know,
no Skype or anything like that.
Nothing. You know, and you talk to people today.
Right.
You know, they can't keep their nose out of their cell phones, but you say, well, yeah, you know. You take off and go away for a year. You don't talk to your wife or your family, nothing, you know. And if you need to get word to them, it takes a while until that letter gets back there. And so that was the only means we had. So we learned to deal with that. And I'm glad that the guys and gals today that are overseas do have the Skype and so forth that they can find a way to do. That would have been very helpful. It really would have. Yes.
Now, on your second tour in Vietnam, you were the flight commander for General Creighton Abrams, who was over all Vietnam forces at the time. What was that experience like? Was he a tough general?
Yeah, but he was a good guy.
Yeah. I think I remember pictures. He loved to smoke a cigar. Right?
Yeah, he did. Absolutely, he did. And he actually chewed on it. More, I think, than smoked it. He chewed it. And he was in a tough position. He was an armor officer. He followed General Westmoreland in that job as the commander in Vietnam. Right. And General Westmoreland was more flamboyant, a little more open with the media and so forth. General Abrams did not. He didn't care to talk to him much unless he had to. And because they would, you know how they are, they'd take something he said and twist it around and so forth. So he didn't really have a lot of time for them. But he had the real ability to sit down and talked to the ambassador, Ellsworth Bunker at the time, which we took him down to the embassy a lot of times just to talk with him. And he could turn around and sit down with the crew chiefs and door gunners on our aircraft. I mean, he had the ability to do that, and he preferred to talk to them than he did the others. Really, he did. He was down to earth with this kids. So that's a good quality in a person. Really
Harold, you're obviously a good pilot, but what was the other criteria that went into be chosen as the pilot, you know, for the overall commander of the war zone?
Well, it was interesting because prior to my going down there, they were these people were all warrant officers.
Yeah.
The warrant officer in the Army that's his reason for being, and they had so forth. And they had a problem at that detachment where I was. I was I was reassigned at 3 o'clock in the morning. I guess they figured they'd send a commissioned officer down. But you got to remember, I was a warrant officer before. Sure. Okay, I went through flight school as a cadet. I was the W-2 before I was a second lieutenant. And when I arrived there, lo and behold, I had more flying time in the Huey than any of those guys. I had 2 W4s, 2 W3s, and a W2 there with me. So we got along fine, and you know, we found out what the problem was and fixed it, and went on from there. It was different, very different.
Were you a little nervous the first time you flew the general?
Well, sure you are.
Yeah.
You know, and particularly this guy. He always told up front,
yeah,
he does not like helicopters. He doesn't like to be bounced around. You know, really. So you, and so you really took your time with him. You know, but
you did that most of the during your tour in the second tour?
The second tour, that's correct.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. You didn't. It was one of those things where, wow, you know, every time I left Saigon with him back there, I had an empty helicopter flying. I had a couple of gunships with me and a whole bit. It was, you know, say, well, you know, if something happens, we're going to get out of this mess, you know. But on the other hand, you didn't want to land too hard and flip his hat down his face, you know. You don't do that stuff.
Did you stay in contact with him much after the war? Or anything
No,
like
not really. The guys, with the guys that I had left behind, and they kind of ran interference there. You know, how's the old man doing and so forth. And when I left there, Tom, he had been there 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And he was tired. He really did. Yeah. And it was within the following year that he came back and was the chief of staff of the Army and died in office.
Yeah.
He did. And his number 2 man, which also flew there, is another 4-star, Fred Wyand. He was the vice chief of staff, and they moved him to the into that job. So both those 4 stars followed each other when they came back from Vietnam.
Right. Yeah.
And both very interesting, very different people. But it was nice to had the opportunity to see that side of it.
Sure.
It really was.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure you have mixed feelings about serving in a war. What is your favorite memory from serving in Vietnam or in the Army? You served a tour, you know, quite, 20, is it?
Right.
20 years, yeah.
I think, if I had to nail it down, there were a lot that really didn't have anything to do with flying. My tour in Germany, I was there for 3 years with the 1st and 7th Infantry. The 18 months that I was a company commander in the 1st 7th Infantry, that probably was one of the toughest things I ever did, but one of the most rewarding when it was over. An opportunity to be with the young folks. You had to win them over. You had to respect them in order to get theirs. You know, that's a two-way street.
Yeah.
We had problems and so forth before I took that company, and after about 6 months, boy, we were moving like a well-oiled machine, and I actually sat down and cried when I had to leave it. You know,
that's a great
truly,
feeling
it was a great feeling.
To bring something back. Like
Yes,
that.
yes.
Yeah.
But you can't do that unless you have, the next level was the battalion commander, and you have to have somebody in that seat that you really, you know, work together with.
Sure.
And I had probably the greatest, you know, really good man there. So.
Harold, as we mentioned earlier, you received 2 Valor Awards for your service in combat. Tell us about the battles or combat action that led to you receiving those awards.
The first Distinguished Flying Cross was, I was not even flying that day. It was that day I was off on standby to fly the maintenance ship out with them. And late in the afternoon, the flight had come back to our location at Bearcat.
What year was this now?
This was in early 60, let me get the thing straightened out. No, it was in it was October 67, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
I straightened things out.
Yeah.
And I heard them land and so forth, because they do make a lot of racket when they all come in. There's 14 of them. You know, flight of 10, 4 gunships and a command and control. And they had landed, and I said, geez, they're still running out there. And a friend of mine came through the back of our tent, and he said, I need to find an aircraft commander. What are you doing? I says, what do you need? He said, I need somebody to replace me. Their flight's been called back out, and I have to go see the battalion commander. I said, okay. So I got suited up and went out and jumped in, and away we went. And I asked the pilot, I said, where are we going? He told me back down the area of Tan An and the Mekong Delta, so forth. Now, to start the story here, this guy that was flying with me had been in our unit 2 weeks, brand new to Vietnam. Okay, now we're going to go out together at night. And combat assault formation of 10 going into landing zones. Now, this is the only thing that can make this worse is if it goes hot. Okay, so I was talking to him. By the time we got to where we were going, it was dark. I had to find a place to land on a dirt road outside this compound, and I just got it down, sat down, and waited, and was listening to the radio. You know, that's all I had to do. And all of a sudden, the troops came out, crawled on. I said, I wish I knew where we were going. You know, I didn't know. I hadn't been there that day, okay? And so the flight started taking off, and some of us had weaker aircraft. Mine, they were having trouble getting off the ground with their, and I started to go. The guy in front of me started down. I actually had to land on a bunker. I hope those guys probably remember that for the rest of their lives. There were people inside it, and we took off, and we were en route to the landing zone, and I told my pilot, I said, look, John, I said, here's what you need to do in case something happens going in there. I said, I'll fly it, and I said, you ride the controls with me in case something does happen. And explaining to him all this, well, all of a sudden, you know, we started receiving tracers, ground fire coming up, and they get flying around. You can't distract yourself. You got to keep your head in it. And I no sooner got done with my instructions, and a couple rounds came through the cockpit, and I felt a sting in my left leg. But your adrenaline's pumping, you know. And we went in and landed and took back out, and I felt something warm in my left leg. I said, I think I know what that is. Okay, so I told him, I said, take the controls. So we were flying back out again, and my pant leg was all wet. We had around to come through, broken up a lot of the stuff. There was a lot of shrapnel. My left leg looked like something like you'd get hit with a shotgun. You know, it was all frightened. It was shrapnel. Right. So we looked at it, and all of a sudden, boom! I'm looking at the ceiling. My door gunner grabbed it. You can lay those seats on her back, and he was up there right away. You know, and getting a thing to wrap my leg up with, and so forth. So, in the meantime, this conversation's going on. My pilot stepped on the mic and went hot, so the rest of the outfit's listening to our conversation. And then we started going, "You all right? You all right?" Yeah, I'm fine. I looked at it. I said, "Look, we'll continue to go on." So we had to go pick up more troops, put them back into that landing zone, and that worked out. You have to understand how tough that is, particularly on a new guy. Going into a hot landing zone at night with 10-hour helicopters, you got to have eyes everywhere. You can't do that. You know, and you've got to be calm when you do it. So I didn't know this guy probably had 50 hours in country, period, if he had that much. Not that I didn't trust him. Just, you know, had I not been able to fly, I might have had to back out. Because you're then putting a lot of people at risk that you didn't have to. But you're always there to try and support that flight commander or that guy or the ground commander. You don't like to put him into a hot landing zone without always people, you know, so at the same time. So we did that, so forth, and fine. It was over. We stopped at an aid station on the way back, and they took me in and dug out some chunks of metal that I have them somewhere. And so forth.
You keep them in a jar or something.
Yeah. And so it wasn't all that bad. It's just things that my guy was more sore for them messing with me than.
Is it any lingering wounds?
No. There were a couple of things showed up later, but you know,
probably still have maybe.
There may be. You know, if I get asked about that, people that when I go in for surgery, you ever in there? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'd had some. You know, so if you've, but so as a result of that, the next morning. I had gone to my own flight surgeon, and they got a little bit more out of it. And I got a call to go to the battalion commander's office, so I went over there, and here's the 1st Aviation Brigade commander, 2-star general there. And they gave me a spot award of the Distinguished Flying Cross and the Purple Heart from the night before. And the fact that there was a 2-star involved, the Associated Press picked up on it big time. And my wife's at home in Altoona, Pennsylvania. At work, gets a phone call from the local radio station wanting to know how bad her husband had been shot the night before.
Well, that's scary.
It was. This is what they do. You know, this is what they go through. And so I immediately went back and said, geez, I better get a letter in the mail. And I did. It was, but the other thing that was happening in 10 days, I was to meet her in Hawaii for R&R. And she was all worked up over that. And I was hoping to get their letter. And so finally, you know, she hadn't heard from me, got on a plane and flew to Hawaii. She had her tickets, why not? You know, if not, she's going to have an R&R by herself in Honolulu, you know. So, but anyhow, she got there, and they took her by bus down to the airport from the R&R center and stood there. She stood there and watched. She didn't know I was going to be there until she saw me get off the plane. Yeah. And
you got the hug of your life.
Oh, yeah, sure did. Absolutely. And I said, you know, had somebody back on this other side been smart enough to tell her to call the Red Cross, they could probably find out something.
Sure.
She did go to the recruiter's office, and that, but they didn't, you know, whatever.
Didn't connect.
No, didn't connect. So that's just one of the things that these ladies went through, and I'll tell you, you know, she's the hero of my life. What she went through because of what I was doing and so forth. It was.
Did you receive your second DFC in this same tour?
Yes, I did. It was in January of '68. I'm sorry. Now this time I was out flying that day with the unit. We had I was flying this lead for the second flight of 5. Sometimes we went as a flight of 10. Sometimes 2 flights of 5. Right. And we were working with ARVNs, the Vietnamese army, okay? And we had put them out during the day and in an area where there was a river on 3 sides of them, okay? And right before dark, they were under contact and so forth. And we got called to go back out and try to start extracting them. And we had made one extraction out of there, and geez, I didn't know who was firing at who. We had artillery coverage going in on sides of us, and it was like, like, you know, 4th of July at the Statue of Liberty. But we came back out of there and went back and landed and left them out. And the flight, the operations officer was the flight commander for our flight that day. Came down and talked to us and said, you, I want you all to go. We're going to take 5 more helicopters out there. We got some more to get out. And I walked up to him and talked to him. I said, Captain, wait a minute. He had been new in country. He wasn't there very long. Right. Let's talk about this. I said, every one of these helicopters has an aircraft commander in it. And the 2 lead have 2 in the seats. I said, let's just pick people, put all aircraft commanders in those 5 helicopters, because it's going to get nasty when we go back out there. We need all the experience in this. Sure. That's a good idea. So we went. And we went back in, and it was another another exciting time and so forth. And when we came back, of course, my aircraft was one that was down after this was over. Now, we left, of the 14 helicopters we had involved down there, I think we left 5 of them behind that night. We couldn't fly them back. And so that, later on, I thought, well, they said, well, we're going to write you guys up. I thought, well, there's a air medal with V or something, you know. I didn't know until I got back to Fort Walters and back to the States, and it caught up with me, and it was another DFC for that night.
Right.
And I said, well, you know, it's fine. But those things, it seems like it's the night activities that seem to trigger these things, you know, because it's tough out there.
Yeah.
It really
I
is.
guess you took a lot of hits in your aircraft.
Oh, geez, yeah. I won't tell you what my nickname was. But every time I went out there, somebody fired around in anger, we normally picked it up. There's supposed to be a book coming out in the chapter that on our unit, and there's the guy doing this stuff said that you have your own chapter, Stitt. He said, we've named it after your nickname. I said, oh, geez. I can't even let my kids read this one, but no, you know, whatever.
Okay. Harold, many of the combat veterans we talked with mentioned a family member, a tough sergeant, a commanding officer, your upbringing. Share with us, who do you think helped prepare you the most to take the actions that you did in combat?
I think our first company commander in Vietnam, who was not the company commander when we left Fort Bragg. As typical aviation units in that time frame, first of all, aviation company commanders are normally majors, okay? And in that time frame, a lot of our majors were primarily fixed-wing aviators, and they had Q courses in the helicopter and so forth. But we had 3 majors in the company: the company commander, XO, and the gun platoon leader. And the XO took the advance party to Vietnam to go in there, and they started putting up tents and so forth. And the main body we went over with, the gun platoon commander, was Lee, because our company commander decided to stay behind with the rear detachment. Wow. So we had no longer gotten in the country. We were throwing our duffel bags down, and we had these tents, and it was monsoon or started raining, all this mess, and somebody called out that we were having a formation. I said, what in the world's going on here? But I stood there and witnessed our battalion commander tell the story. Said, your XO was a good man. Your company commander, I've relieved him because his company's in combat and he stayed behind. And he looked at our gun platoon leader, he looked at him and says, Major, do you want this company? And he said,
Just
yes,
like
sir,
that.
just like that. That's
Yeah.
how it happened. And so it was a blessing that it happened because this guy was what we needed.
Sure.
He was very thorough, very understanding, and we were all learning together. And he did. And we stood behind him. We'd have followed him anywhere. And
It's what you needed at that time.
we had to have that.
Yeah,
We really did.
yeah.
And I guarantee you, we weren't going to have it with the guy that stayed behind. I'm going to tell you that. Just be honest.
Yeah.
And he really did the job. And before he turned the command over to the next guy, he did put three of us warrant officers in for battlefield commissions or direct commissions, and they all came down approved. And we are friends today. In fact, he
Good.
called me about 3 days ago.
Really?
He's living in Salt Lake
Fantastic.
City. Yeah, he's a
Stay in
great
contact.
man. Really, really good person. Yes.
How would you describe to young people what it's like to serve in a war zone? Those young people may be watching this interview, the thoughts you have of possibly being killed or wounded during battle. Describe that for me.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you sit around thinking about it, it's probably going to start working on you. You've got to accept accept the risk that it's there. And you cannot sit around thinking about that. You find other things to occupy your time. And it's normally with your friends there. You're all in the same boat.
Right.
You know, and whether it be making fun of somebody or whatever, we did, and it was there. And when you did get put into those situations, you had to fall back on your training. That is the one thing that gets you out of these things.
It has to kick in.
It has
doesn't
to kick in.
Yeah.
And in addition to the training, it's like playing a ball game. You know, every game that you play another down or another inning, you learn something. The experience factor starts working. And actually, there is no better teacher than experience. None whatsoever.
Right.
So when you combine those two things and so forth, then you're there. And to say, that, hey, are you scared? Sure, absolutely, when things happen. But you don't allow that to take it over. You get through it. And I was one, and most of us were, that while things were happening, we got it done, okay? And then we thought about it later.
Yeah.
Okay? We didn't think about it while it was happening.
If you think about it then, it could be detrimental.
Well, yeah, because, you can...
Got your mind on something else
well,
instead of your mission. Yeah.
You're typically not there by yourself. Remember, you've got these other helicopters with all these rotor blades turning. You've got to keep your eye on what's going on. You've got to keep your mind in it. Certainly.
Harold, how do you feel when people call you a hero, when you read about, or when they read about, or hear what you did in combat? How does that make you feel?
It's kind of a thing that kind of bothers us a little bit. We believe that we were there to do a job. We were trained to do a job. One of the things that our jobs, we were able to do it because we always knew that somebody always had your back. Okay, that helped us get through.
Yeah.
And there would be times whenever it was your turn to have somebody else's back. And that was a comforting thing. And the occasion arises once in a while. It came up to me a couple times. And I was glad that I was there at that time and was able to do whatever needed to be done. But that's a good feeling.
Yeah.
It really is, to know that, hey, these guys, they'll do anything. That's the way it is.
You're feeling a part of something, accomplishing something.
Oh, yeah. And if something goes wrong, they're there. Hey, and it's not only people in your own unit.
Yeah.
The day I got involved in a thing, I was flying with a Special Forces senior advisor, and I heard a mayday come up. Somebody was going down. And I told my crew, I said, that mayday was very close. I could tell by the volume on the radio. I said, keep your eyes open. And here we were out in the middle of nowhere, and there was a helicopter down, there was so forth, and it was not in a good area. We were in a jungle. And so we went in, landed, and tried to get these guys out. One guy carried him threw him in the back of the helicopter, got the guns off that ship and so forth. And this commander, this colonel, set the helicopter on fire and burn it so that they,
Wow.
yeah, I did. That was all.
So the enemy
By the
couldn't-
time I tell you, by the time I came out of there, I had to dodge helicopters. These guys all showed up. They were all over the place, you know, like a beehive.
How can they help?
Yeah, that's true. That's
Yeah,
true.
sure, yeah.
And the end of this story is when I got back to my unit that night. Typically, went back, checked in, and had ate dinner and whatever. Was headed back to my area, and I ran into my company commander walking down the board sidewalk. Yeah. He looked at me and he said, "Mr. Stitt?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Did you pull somebody out of a crashed helicopter today?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Why don't you tell people about that?" I said, "Well, it was, you know, it was what we had to know." He said, "You realize that the pilot on that helicopter was one of our people? Was flying with another unit that day. I didn't know."
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, really. I said, "Well, I'm good to be, you know, whatever." But I said, "I didn't know.
Yeah.
I had no idea." So,
Do you often wonder, would you do it all over again?
I think so.
Yeah.
I do. You know, I lived in a town that was not going merry, and they really are not growing anywhere. Everything was stagnant and so forth. But once you get with these people, you meet a group of people that are different than anything you've ever known, and so forth. So, yeah, once you got through 5 years or so of that and decided to stay after discussing with your wife and so on, and yeah, I think so. It's I can't explain it any differently other than, hey, we've got a good thing going here now. We've been through the hard times a lot as far as that part goes.
Yeah.
But you're never through all of it. These wives put up with a
Yeah.
lot. They really
So
do.
that extended military family.
Absolutely is. It absolutely
Home front.
is. Yeah. Home front, absolutely.
There were protests, Harold, against the Vietnam War when you served. Did you ever encounter any of those protests? And if so, how did it make you feel?
Actually, I did not personally encounter that. I have friends that did. I saw it on television.
Yeah.
Okay, and so forth. And it actually made me angry that this was going on. And but the places where I went to when I went back to central Pennsylvania, that wasn't going to happen there. That was not going to happen there. And then, of course, because I stayed I went to a military installation in Texas to become a flight instructor. And so in Texas was another patriotic area too. That group down there. And so I didn't witness it personally. I had friends that did, and they talked about it. But you know, I just really said, really, people, come on, you know, this just isn't fair to, you know, what happened there. We didn't call those shots. You know, we were there.
You served when asked.
That's correct.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
Now, after Vietnam, Harold, you served in several other duty stations during your 20-year career. Talk about in Germany. I think you served a couple of tours over there.
Yeah,
right?
just one. But
one, okay.
After when I came back, I had gone to Fort Benning, Georgia, to go to the infantry officers advanced course down there, and I got a delay because there were a bunch of people stacked up in front of us, and I worked there for about 5-6 months in the infantry school at the infantry branch of combat developments. And then we started the advanced course. Well, lo and behold, they were winding down Vietnam.
Yeah.
Okay. And we were going from 1968, where there were over 600,000 people there at the same time, and they were winding her down. A lot of people were leaving the Army, and they were just rifting them, reduction in force. They were leaving. And I was there waiting to go to the advanced course, and I got a letter in the mail that said, "You've been selected to go to participate in the Army's degree completion program, and we'll send you to college for up to 2 years if you can complete a discipline in one of these areas." And that all worked great. I mean, there it was, and we did that. And when we finished that, we went to Germany. And Germany was now, in those days, we didn't have an aviation branch. We had to serve typically with one of the combat arms, and I was infantry. So I went to an infantry battalion in Germany and spent the 3 years with the 3rd Infantry Division, a battalion and brigade levels. I had a company commander and as battalion and brigade staff. And in those 3 years, we made a lot more friends.
Yeah.
As I said, my wife had twins in Germany. That was another, you know, and the wives, the battalion wives, they pitch in, they show up and they help, okay? That's extended family you have.
Yeah.
And because she was having twins, they put her down in the 7th month and took her off her feet. And they were running a roster. I mean, I come home from in the evening, walk in, and some strange woman's in my wife cooking supper. And who are you? You know, really, they were just wonderful.
Yeah, filling in,
and they do
helping out.
that. They
Sure.
absolutely do that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, after 20 years, you wind up in Huntsville. Tell us about that. How did you decide to locate here?
It was interesting. I was getting ready to leave Germany.
Yeah.
And a good friend of mine who had been the Bravo Company commander in the 1st to 7th. We were good friends, and he had returned to the States about a year ahead of me. And I didn't know, but he was in infantry branch in the Pentagon, captain's level. And I had no orders to come back to the States. So I said, where are we going to go? Normally he did. And I said, we better find out what's happening. So I got a control number, called back, and guess, lo and behold, this guy answers the phone. And I said, John, who? He said, yeah. He said, Stitt, is this you? I said, yeah, it is, John. I said, John, I'm coming back to the States in 80-some days, and I have no orders. He said, wait a minute, I'll get your records. He said, we can't find them. I said, that's warming. That's a good feeling. And he said, at the time, he says, well, where do you want to go? I says, I don't know, John, but I'll tell you a couple of places I don't. And so he said, I'll get back to you in a couple of days. So he did. And all of a sudden, I'm coming to Redstone Arsenal, and I said, "Where's that?"
Yeah.
I didn't know where it was.
Yeah, never been stationed here.
And so forth, with some training in between and so forth, and that's how I ended up here.
Wow.
Little did I know what a favor that guy did for me. Okay.
Wow.
And I got here, and the other thing I say, geez, this has really been a well-kept secret. And being a part of the Hellfire Project Office at that time. And being having the only flight slot that wasn't at the airfield, here I was. It was good. It really was. And we developed and tested a very good system that's still out there doing its thing today. And I was so glad to be a part of that. Yeah. Primary responsibility for me in there was doing the operational testing at Fort Hunter Liggett, California. And that went very well. And
how long did you work with that project?
I was in Hellfire for about 3.5 years. Yeah. And I was sitting there, and I got a phone call and telling me I had to leave. And I said, come on, guys, you know, you could, I like what I'm doing here. Yeah. So he said, well, don't, wait. He said, we have ROTC assignments in mind for you. And I thought, well, everybody was begging for those things. Yeah. Said, one close to where you are, one close to your home back in Pennsylvania. So I asked him where they were located. And when he said Florence, I said, Italy? He said, no, Alabama. I said, oh, geez, okay. So we looked at the whole thing, and I went over to UNA to join their military science department. Wow. And as a result of that, I did my time there. I was not going to take a regular Army commission, so I had to leave the Army at 20 years. But when I came back to Huntsville for almost 3 years, I completed an MBA through this process and so forth. At night, again, you know, all this stuff's at night. Yeah. Came back to the Strategic Defense Command, the military command. They had so many different names out there. Yeah. And the Missile Defense Command. Yeah. And finished my tour out there and worked for another 20 years here after I retired. So it worked out. My kids did not have to deal with moving because they were old enough now that we were going to place them in place and so forth. So, and the things about retiring, we didn't go anywhere. We stayed in the same house. We went to the same church. They went to the same schools. Yeah. They had their friends. Okay, that made that part of it very easy. Easy, it sure did.
Well, tell us about your family. I know your wife of 52 years, Virginia, passed away a few years ago. But you have 3 daughters and, what is it, two grandchildren you got?
2 grandchildren. The 3
tell us
daughters.
about your family.
All right, 3 daughters. Oldest is Mary Lee, and she has MS. We've been found out about that about 16 years ago, and she works for Blue Cross and Blue Shield in Birmingham, Alabama, and doing well with all of that. The twins, Amy, had worked several jobs. She was working for Crestwood Hospital, and they had to cut back, so right now she's looking for a job. But she's very good in the computer world and so forth, so she'll find something along the road. And it seems like she had some good jobs along there, and the people that companies actually sold out and moved on, and she was a victim of that stuff. Her sister, Becky, we call her the youngest because she was 11 minutes younger than Amy.
And she brags about that.
Yeah, she does. Yeah. Well, Amy does. She's 11 minutes older. And Becky was the different. The other two daughters all had blonde hair, and when Becky was born, they showed her to my wife. Said, "That's not my baby." She had brown hair.
And you tell Becky that story
she
now?
knows it. Oh yeah, she knows it. She tells it.
And she's
okay?
quite an athlete, don't you tell her?
Well,
a little
yeah,
about that?
she just a couple of weeks ago was inducted into the Huntsville-Madison County Athletic Hall of Fame.
Very proud of her.
For playing all the way from middle school all the way through college.
Yeah.
And in college playing two sports, which is tough to do when you're pre-med and so forth. And that was it. That was her life. And
She's teaching now, right?
yeah, well, that, and she is she worked as a biologist for 20 years, and she finally took a job as a coach and does teach a couple of classes at Westminster Academy here in Huntsville, and took my two grandkids. One, she's coaching the high school girls basketball team. She has done the middle school volleyball team too. Those were her two sports. And the two grandchildren, Justin has just turned 15, and he plays three sports: football, basketball, and baseball. My granddaughter at the school plays basketball and plays soccer in a club team.
All this keeps you quite busy.
Oh yeah, you can live on the sports fields and in bleachers, which I was quite used to,
Yeah.
and so forth. But they're doing very well at what they're doing, and it's really fun. I'm living my third childhood now through my grandchildren.
Yeah.
And they do well with what they do, and it's fun.
Harold, if for those students that maybe are young people that may be watching, what advice would you give to any of them that may be considering a career in the military?
I would tell them to take a look at both sides of everything. Talk to people. Talk to people that have done it. Don't listen to a recruiter or whatever, because they're in the business. But and talk to somebody that you trust, and you know, probably a close friend, a relative, or whatever. And I have two kids living over my back fence right now. They're in ROTC at Alabama A&M, and I talk to them frequently. So you have to make sure you've seen both sides of it, and that's what you want to do. You can go do it for a while. If you don't like it, you can leave. Okay, but it can become a very worthwhile and a very rewarding experience if things work out for you. And it's completely different from anything else you'd ever do.
Right.
Because you're no longer an employee, okay, anywhere. You're not an employee, believe me. They don't call employees and tell them it's time to pack your bags and leave.
Right.
You know, so.
Now, in 2016, as we mentioned, you were inducted into the Madison County Military Hall of Heroes. What did that experience mean to you, Harold?
At that point in time, in my life was when I was notified that was happening. I thought, wow, you know. My wife had seen these things last few years. She saw it in the newspaper and so forth, and she said, "What's that all about?" I said, "I don't know. I know some of those people and so forth." I said, we left it with that. And then maybe I should have checked into it, because she was not able to participate, and she certainly deserved to be there. But having been told that was going to happen, and I thought, holy cow. I had no idea how good a job that Bob Marshall and Eric and all you guys do with that. Knock yourselves out, and the induction ceremony itself was just overwhelming. It was, and something that my grandkids will remember the rest of their lives, I'm sure. And my daughters and the friends that I had there that night, it was just wow, you know, really something.
Harold, thank you for participating in our oral history interview series and allowing us to preserve your military experience for the people of the community. And thank you, sir, for your service to our country.
Thank you, and thank you for yours, Tom.
Appreciate
It's been my pleasure.
Appreciate that, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Right.
Now, if you'd like more information regarding this interview or any interview in our Military Heritage series, please contact the Madison County Military Heritage Commission website at mcmhc.org. I'm Tom Kennemer. Thank you for being with us.